Thank you, Lisa, and welcome today to KDOT's 2021 local consult meeting for South Central Kansas. And we have taken a look at who's with us today. Thanks everyone for turning out. It's good to see we have more than 100 participants. As I said, we are in the last week of local consult meetings. We have 2 more to go. We've had fantastic turnout, really robust discussions, and I appreciate you all joining us today. I wish very much that we could have been in person, but it was more important that we make sure that we meet now so that we can keep pace with the Eisenhower Legacy, or as we call it, IKE program, and we need to make sure that we have your input as we move toward adding projects to the development pipeline. IKE has been built primarily on public input, and so we wanted to make sure that we could hear from you yet again as we move toward adding projects to the development pipeline. Let's have a quick message from Governor Kelly, and then we'll get right to it.
Hello, I'm Governor Laura Kelly. Thank you all for taking part in this critical effort to improve transportation in Kansas. 2 years ago, more than 2,000 Kansans participated in local consult discussions in communities large and small. Many of you were part of those discussions. In those meetings, you shared ideas to create more flexible approaches to infrastructure improvements. You challenged KDOT to become a better partner and solve more problems by eliminating harmful internal silos. We heard you loud and clear. Thanks to your time, your thoughtfulness, and collaborative spirit, today we have the Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Program, more commonly known as IKE. I signed this landmark 10-year program into law last year after it passed through the legislature with strong bipartisan support. Through IKE, we more than doubled transportation investments from 2018 to fiscal year 22. That's over $1 billion more for projects, for Kansas highways and bridges, for broadband infrastructure, for aviation, public transit, and for biking and walking paths. These investments are making transportation safer. They're strengthening critical infrastructure, creating jobs, and delivering more economic opportunities for our state. My administration is committed to keeping up this momentum. Earlier this summer, we announced nearly $1 billion worth of highway projects moving to the construction pipeline. As promised, we'll deliver one phase of the remaining T-Works projects to construction by the end of this year. And, true to my word, we are on track to close the aptly named Bank of KDOT by fiscal year 23. We're making sure that transportation dollars are used for transportation projects. Again, thank you for participating in the local consult process. Your input shapes the next 8 years of the IKE program, and we'll make sure we deliver the quality transportation system Kansans need. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Governor Kelly. And today, once again, we are putting the principles of IKE into practice. Those principles are first, partnerships, working with communities, with stakeholders, with the public and private sector, so that we can identify more options, more ways to solve problems, because ultimately that's why we're here. We're here to solve problems for Kansans. Now, specifically today, we are here to begin the process of identifying new projects to put into the development pipeline. This is the first time that we've met under the IKE rolling program, and we'll talk a bit more about that in just a minute. We also need to prepare for possible investments through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA. We saw it stall out a bit at the end of last week. However, we know there is good momentum and good support for infrastructure investment across the country, and so we're keeping a close eye on progress in Washington, D.C. I'm sure that something's going to get passed. We just have to better understand at what level and what the parameters might be for that program. We know, though, we are always in better shape when we are prepared and we have projects that are ready to go, and that's why we're here. We need your input today on modernization and expansion projects so that we can put between $600 and $750 million worth of work into the development pipeline. I should point out that's a statewide number, not a district-specific number. It's worth pausing for just a moment, as I said, to think about the implications of what local consult means under the rolling program. So because this program is more dynamic, we are able to better meet emerging needs and opportunities as they arise. As we have more flexibility under IKE, I'm firmly convinced with that additional flexibility comes the responsibility of greater transparency. I encourage you to visit the website, KSDOT IKE. It's an award-winning, actually, now I'm glad to say it's an award-winning website, and you can learn all kinds of information about our progress for IKE. Today, we'll follow largely the same agenda that we would under a typical local consult meeting. We have some survey results to share with you, and then we have project lists with scores and updated information. One of the benefits of this rolling program is that we have time to check to see how improvements are playing out in the real world. We have updated scores and better cost estimates that I'll spend a little more time in a minute talking about. You will be placed through the magic of technology into Zoom room breakouts for discussions about projects. We'll then have a short break and come back to learn about KDOT initiatives, and then hear a summary or report out from each of the groups so that we can better understand what your region, which projects your region most supports. Now, in terms of survey results, I'm thrilled to say that we had more than 2,000 responses to a statewide survey and more than 200 from District 5. District 5 is that South Central District where you're located. So let's think about what we heard from you in terms of some of your top priorities. Coming in at 27%, and no surprise, your top priority is safety, and KDOT shares that priority. After that, economic development comes in at 15%, 13% on preservation, and 11% on multimodal choices. I'd like to share some comments that we saw through the notes section of that survey. And I would have to say I completely agree with both of these. In terms of safety, people are interested in their phones and passing in unsafe conditions. They rarely move over, and that's the law. I share that concern. At KDOT, we are taking a hard look at what we can do in terms of partnering with law enforcement to try to address some of these issues. Also, a note that rural intersection safety improvements are needed. Absolutely. We have established SSI, Strategic Safety Improvement Program. I'll talk a bit more in a minute. And that's one of the ways we can try to get to some of these particularly troublesome spots sooner rather than later. In terms of development, likewise, there are some empty facilities that could be used if transporting products were easier. We understand that. That's why we have this rolling program, so that as opportunities or needs emerge, we can get to those quicker than if we had a 10-year set list of projects. Now, in terms of active transportation, we heard through local consult 2 years ago about the need to make our communities more livable, places where Kansans want to live and work and raise their families. And I think we see some good indicators of that here, like a sidewalk program that would assist with funding projects so that it would improve the overall health of our community. Or saying that our city's been working on biking and hiking trails for a long time and state support is needed. Absolutely. I would encourage you to take a look at the cost share program, where we have an ability to get to some of those projects sooner rather than later. So as Governor Kelly said, more than 2,000 Kansans shaped IKE. And I'm very pleased that we heard from 2,000 Kansans again through the survey. We have more than 100 folks participating today, and we have had more than 100 people at each of our meetings thus far through local consult. So in terms of a quick view of IKE, it's a $9.9 billion program over the next 10 years to strengthen infrastructure and create more economic growth opportunities. The bulk of the program, appropriately $5 billion, is targeted for preservation work, which is appropriate. When you think about the value of our state's highway system is north of $30 billion. It's one of the state's most valuable assets. We need to make sure we take good care of that asset. You see, $2.3 billion has been targeted for modernization and expansion projects. You also see other funds identified there in terms of allocation, making $9.9 billion. In terms of the South Central District, $300 million has been targeted for modernization and expansion projects at a minimum. When you look down the row, or the column, I mean, for modernization and expansion, you see that totals 1.1 billion. But I said we're going to put 2.3 billion toward modernization and expansion. That difference represents flexibility and ability to get to needs as they emerge and opportunities that you may have available to you. For the South Central District, to date, we have identified 9 projects at $145 million for construction, and we have 2 additional projects in the development pipeline at a total of $240 million. So you see, we've already exceeded the minimum for District 5 in terms of plans and almost for plans and construction. But we're not done yet. That's why we're out, and we want to talk with you today. So I've talked about these pipelines, and I'd like to talk about the interrelated nature of those. So first, you put projects into development. And in that pipeline, you do things like engineering, look at right-of-way, clear environmental permits. Last year, the IKE program was passed in March. The governor signed it in April. And by May, we put more than $1.6 billion worth of work into development. This summer, we moved $750 million out of development and put it into construction. Now it's time to backfill. It's time to put more work into development. We currently have about $825 million, but we want a robust pipeline, both so that we can use state dollars efficiently and effectively, and so we're prepared when the federal program passes. That's what we're here to do today, is to talk about what projects need to be developed next. Okay, so how do we replenish that pipeline? Well, you go back to the principles, right? First, in partnership with communities, we're going to come out and talk to you every 2 years. So we hold local consult more often. Then we're going to have more options. Today, we have new projects to talk about and more project scopes for discussion, all so that we can better solve problems, both with more options and because we have better data now upon which to discuss and make decisions. So in your packet, that obviously it wouldn't be a KDOT meeting if we didn't have lots of good information for you. There are 3 sheets that we'll be working from today, these project lists, and you see they're represented here with the red outlines. Because Wichita is located in the South Central District, we have urban expansion projects and rural expansion projects. We recognize there's a bit of a difference in those in the nature of those two, and we have modernization projects. I'm going to review first what remains the same as 2019 in terms of scoring and project development. And then I'll talk about some of the new aspects here in 2021. So first, what's the same? The scoring process remains the same. We have the same project category types, we're using the same factors, and the same overall weights. Once again, we're bringing to you draft engineering and economic scores for discussion, and we want to talk with you and listen to your thoughts to inform the regional priority score. This is an important note that scoring allows us to compare projects fairly because we compare them to each other. We use the same process, and then we, in a relative way, compare them to each other. I'm not trying to tell you that this is an exact science or these are precisely the right scores. What I can tell you is a project that scores a 20 is likely to be better than one that scores a 1. So that is how the comparative nature of scoring works. Now, in terms of types, factors, and overall weights, preservation and preservation plus, as I said, represents about $5 billion worth of investment. It's for things that are like overlays, reconstruction, bridge repair, bridge replacement, and we use data, engineering data, to make those selections at 100%. Under the modernization category, that's where we take the existing highways and we make them a little bit better by adding shoulders, flattening hills, straightening curves. In that case, we rely on 80% engineering data and 20% local input to develop a project score. On expansion, where we're adding something to the system, like adding lanes or interchanges, in that case, we look to 50% of engineering data for the score, 25% for local input, and 25% for economic analysis. In terms of modernization scoring, the engineering factors that we take a look at are things like geometrics, curves, for example, safety, capacity, how much traffic can that roadway carry, along with the pavement structure and surface. We look at other factors as well, like route continuity and previous investment. That's because any segment of highway, whether it's 1 mile or 10 miles, rarely exists unto itself. It attaches to another piece of highway or to a bridge, and we need to take a network or a systems view when we make improvements. In terms of expansion, where we're adding, we look at current and future projected congestion, truck traffic, and safety. We also look at economic factors, including gross regional product and traveler benefit. I'll talk a bit more about that in just a minute. And of course, we continue to look at the route continuity and previous investment factors. So in terms of updates to our scoring methodology, we have the opportunity now, every 2 years when we come to you, to make refinements to our scoring, to have a bit of a more discrete or discerning approach, a more sensitive analysis. So let's start first with safety. We look at both crash rate and crash frequency. Previously, we just looked at the rate. Now we look at how often a crash may occur at a location. This helps normalize or balance out our view of the safety score because we're taking into account not just the severity of an accident at one location, but how frequently might it occur. The second one relates to thresholds. You can think of this as sort of like grading on a curve. So as our system, as the state system improves, you need to make sure that you are more finely or in a more discernible way looking at the differences between projects. You essentially don't want all projects making 100%, or it's hard to know which one is relatively better. So we've changed the thresholds and we're grading on a harder curve now. And then in terms of economic scoring, we've updated our scoring methodology to reflect where we are in our state's development phase. So if you recall, under T-Works, that was the first time we looked at economic analysis. And in 2008, 2009, we were coming out of the Great Recession, and the state desperately needed jobs. So we weighted jobs as an important economic factor. Today, we need to take a look at things like, how do we create a place where people want to live? So we more highly value people's time. In 2019, to get to that, we continued to look at gross regional product, just as we did under T-Works, and we added travelers' personal time to that equation and divided by cost, and then used that same analysis for the other 50% of the score. Now, as we think about inflation and other sorts of factors and perhaps additional funds, we take gross regional product plus traveler personal time and divide entirely by cost. Essentially, we're taking a harder look at cost because money matters. So in terms of the 2021 project list for this area, here are the things that you will see. We have updated data for the most current data sets available, including traffic, crash, and pavement condition. We had time to send crews literally out into the field to take a look and do a passing lane analysis. What we needed to understand is where are the best locations for passing lanes and where might a passing lane really not be as viable. And in some cases, are there other projects nearby, maybe coming out of T-Works, where we want to wait and see what the impact may be on that location. This is another benefit of the rolling program, is to be able to do field verification. We also have better information on scopes and better cost estimates. A good example here is on US 400 Butler County project in East Junction, US 77 to Leon. It's been rescoped to have the most impactful section come up in priority. The scoring methodology changes, I'm happy to say, reflect the input that we heard through local consult, and we have some new projects to take a look at as well. Again, a benefit of the rolling program. So this is what I like to call the show your math kind of moment. Essentially, we have 4 buckets, if you will, of projects. Some that have moved on to the development and construction pipeline. I've already talked a bit about those. So if you start up here in 2019, some projects have already moved on to development or construction. You're welcome to talk about those, but that's probably not the best use of your time. Then we have projects that remain from 2019 that you may want to talk about. And we have some new projects that have been added either through the district suggestions or through public input in the last 2 years, and some additional or refined scopes or better cost estimates. And then some projects that have not been scored this time. You can still talk about them, they aren't off our radar. We just did not score them. I'll talk a bit more about that as well. So to start with, projects from 2019 that are now in the development pipeline, Maggie's done a great job of putting a list together with an orange banner that denotes these are already on their way to construction. So good news, these are already moving forward. That's sort of the easiest bucket. Then on the buckets 2 and 3 that I talked about, there are the previous projects. Those are in regular font. The new projects that are available to discuss today are in italicized font. And then there are some projects that from 2019 that weren't scored this year. And that's for a couple of reasons. So for example, you would see some of the projects on US 50 in Harvey County. Those were addressed by another project selected for passing lanes. We need to evaluate to see if those still make sense after the improvement is made. Or 254 in Butler County, we scored the Ohio Street interchange instead of the River Road Valley based on public input. There are some other projects that you would see like low engineering need, US 77 in Cali County. These projects you are welcome to discuss, and if you would want us to rescore them, we will. But I learned something from the Pennsylvania DOT a few years ago at a conference. They have been under a rolling program for a long time, and all they would ever do is add more projects to the list. And their list became billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. And then at a conference once, they stood up and said, you know what we've learned? Money matters. And I thought, well, yes, it does. And then they went through the very painful process of taking lots of projects off the project list. We have some projects in other regions of the state where and they're very expensive, and they may be good projects at the end of this program or the first of the next program. But I want to be really honest with people and help everyone understand projects that we currently think have a good chance of moving forward, or projects that maybe we want to look at later. But this is our time to show our math, and we want to hear from you if you think we're generally on the right track or if we need to bring some of those projects forward. All right, so in terms of a summary overall for District 5, 11 projects have moved to development or construction. We have 14 new projects for you to discuss. 11 projects weren't scored this year. 6 projects have been refined or their scope has been changed. And we have 8 projects with updated cost estimates. That was part of that field verification effort where we were better able to get a sense of what the costs would really be. Now, if there's a favorite slide, it's in the deck, it's this one, because it's important. Scoring doesn't equal programming. So you could have a perfect project and it would cost $10 and it would have a score of a 10. Or you could have 3 projects and maybe they each cost $3.3 and they might score a 9, an 8, and a 7. So even though none of those projects were quite a 10, when you add them up, you may get more comprehensive benefit on this side than with one single $10 project. And it's because we're trying to build a team of great projects for the state, that we have to take a statewide view and a regional view and put together the set of projects that will work best for our state. So our score is important, yes, but they are not the only thing that we take into consideration when we have to balance lots of factors as we build a development pipeline and then move to a construction pipeline. So today, when you go into your Zoom room breakout groups, I ask you to think about a couple of different things. First, think about those regional survey results. What problems are you trying to solve in your region? Where are you trying to make improvements for the entire region? And then look at the new projects and the revised scopes and the revised cost estimates, and then identify what you consider to be your priorities at the high level and the medium level for the development pipeline. Clearly, there are needs all across the state. All of these are important projects. I know that. We need to hear your thoughts on which, from a regional perspective, are the highest value or the most needed. So in just a minute, you will be automatically transferred to virtual breakout rooms. If you have any trouble, technology has generally worked for us, but if you have any trouble, just use the chat box and Lisa will come in and help you get you into your room. We're at 114 participants. I'm happy to say in each and every one of the meetings, the vast majority of people have come back after the break and have stayed for the entire meeting so that they can hear from each other's groups. So I encourage you to come back after the break and the discussion. So with that, we're going to have 30 minutes for discussion. We'll just round up and say it's 2:00. So you'll have until 2:30 for your discussion, then a 5-minute break. So we'll be back at 2:35 to start with a quick view of new KDOT initiatives and then hear the report back. So with that, Lisa, back to you for the Zoom room breakouts. All right, and welcome back. Thank you all for staying in there. We still have over 100 participants, so thank you. I'd like to begin with a big shout out to the KDOT team, as well as our partners, the contractors, and our engineering consultant partners. I am pleased to announce that in 2020, after the Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Program was passed, we were able to stand up all of the new programs across the program. So that includes things like a broadband program, innovative tech, driver's ed, and reinstate some of the previously very popular programs like the local bridge program. A list of those programs, along with the funds that were allocated and sent out to award, are listed there on your slide. And again, a big thank you to the KDOT team and our partners. Next slide. All right, so another thing for us to talk a bit about is the importance of solving problems from both a state perspective as well as taking full advantage of federal dollars and understanding sort of trends and emerging criteria as it relates to the federal program. So with eyes clearly focused on how we want to deliver for long-term and long-time Kansas infrastructure priorities, and how can we create opportunities for growth in Kansas, we want to see where there might be some opportunities to garner additional federal funds. Two things that have emerged under the Biden administration that we want to make sure that we talk about in our grant applications and that we demonstrate progress. One is around equity. Equity is not just about racial equity. There are many forms of equity, including a conversation that needs to be had around rural equity, outcomes that at times tend to lag in terms of education and income and health outcomes. So you can see here, even within our state, the difference in terms of health outcomes and where we really need to focus some attention. Likewise, as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions, in the United States, transportation is the top greenhouse gas emitter at 28%. When you look at the Kansas view, that pie graph on the right side, you can see when you add together the transportation sector at 24% and ag at 29%, you end up with 53% of greenhouse gases are emitted through transportation and agriculture. Something to bear in mind as we went forward and put together what I'm very pleased to talk about is the HOME, Heartland Opportunities, Markets, and Environment, the pilot projects that we have just initiated in partnership with the Department of Agriculture. So as we're out doing work related to Preservation Plus, that's when we're out rehabbing a highway, we go ahead and sometimes run some broadband because we know in the future, infrastructure will need to talk to vehicles. Sometimes, as we look now to our priority freight corridors, we know that we're going to need that capability. So we run fiber, and if we have additional capacity, we'll lease that out. We are not at all trying to compete with the private sector. Other times, we recognize that we'll just open the trench, and essentially we'll pay for the mobilization costs, and we'll lease out some of that trench space to the private sector, or at other times, we'll open it up and on a case-by-case basis, figure out what sort of works best in that particular case. Now, as we're doing these home pilots, what we're taking a look at is there an opportunity to tee off those priority freight corridors where we're doing work anyway, and in a pilot sort of approach, look if there are ways that we can add capacity related to broadband to get out to farms as they want to take a look at enabling platforms for carbon sequestration and other data analytics related to carbon trading. So those are we have two pilots underway right now, and we appreciate our friends at the Department of Ag. We also are taking a look and thinking very intentionally about EVs or electric vehicles. And you may recall, even during the Super Bowl, we've seen a really huge response from the private sector as we see passenger trucks are going to be coming forward much more quickly related to EV-enabled technology. And as always, when there are challenges, there are opportunities, and vice versa. We know that as we see more electric vehicles come to market, that will impact the way transportation is funded. Our current revenue mix, as you see in the left pie chart, is based on state sales tax along with motor fuels tax, representing 19% and 14% of our revenue mix. When you look forward, not even that far into the future, at 2045, upwards of 60% of KDOT revenue to fund transportation projects and programs could come from our state sales tax. That's a really hefty load, and it worries me. So we need to take a look at options for funding transportation in the future. One possible approach that's been discussed for quite some time on the East and West Coast is this idea of a road usage charge or vehicle miles traveled tax, which says it's more of a user fee and it's more based on the amount of road you use rather than based on the fuel type that you use. I'm pleased to say that KDOT was awarded a grant from the US DOT to study a road usage charge and how it might work in a Midwest context. So we will be engaging with rural communities, the ag industry, and commercial trucking to understand your concerns, to understand the questions that you have, and so that we can really dive into the questions associated with equity and technology and all those sorts of issues. I want to emphasize, this is a voluntary research project. If you want to participate, if you want to see how your driving patterns come together and how those might be charged, it's very much a research project. But if we don't have a point of view and bring data to the table, then I guarantee you the coasts are going to drive very much what a national response might look like. And we ought to be present at the table and have our views well documented through a series of logical and data-driven approaches. So with that in mind, later this week, we'll be launching a survey, a statewide survey, just to gather your thoughts and understand people's concerns and also what your relative understanding of a road usage charge might look like. Then early in the spring, we'll start to design what that pilot would look like, how you would record your mileage, lots of options, paper and pen, an app on your phone, maybe a dongle in your car. We will work in concert with stakeholders to understand how to put that pilot together and then initiate or test those different ideas with some results available by March of 24. If you're interested in participating, please reach out to Joel Skelly and you can see his contact information there. I also want to talk a little bit about Home Field Advantage, a conference that's coming up, a virtual conference that's coming up on October 15th. It's 2 Fridays from now. That is where 10 states, along with KDOT and the Kansas Department of Ag, are going to talk about transportation, ag, and technology with public and private sector leaders. We're going to talk about how to drive down the cost of transporting ag products, how to expand economic opportunities across the 10-state region, how to diversify crops, and improve soil health. I hope you'll join us for this really first of its kind multi-state conversation to drive towards some ideas for pilot projects across the Midwest. And I'd also like to point out that KDOT, one of the projects, Turner Diagonal, it's in Wyandotte County, it's an interchange at about $30 million. About half of it comes from a US DOT grant. It's one of the 12 best projects in the nation, according to AASHTO, our national association. And it could be the People's Choice winner. And if we win, we get a $10,000 prize that we're going to use for a scholarship. Each and every one of us can vote once a day. Actually, it's once every 24 hours. I tried to vote one early morning and they told me no, I had to wait a bit. So every 24 hours, you can vote. Help get us across the line. It's both a source of state pride as well as a good scholarship opportunity for someone to a Kansas institution. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Kay, who now we're for the part everybody's been waiting for, the report out, and let's hear about some of your priority projects.
Update here just momentarily.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we are starting first with the urban expansion projects. And you see that we have two projects that have received 2 stars, indicating some top priority. One would be Kellogg Avenue going east and the Heartland Flyer extension. So let's start first with Kellogg Avenue. And does any facilitators want to speak to the importance of that project? Any facilitator?
Secretary, this is Greg. We discussed that one in our breakout room, and mainly it was the County of Butler and the City of Andover just really expressed the importance to their area and furthering developing and continuing the expansion of US 54 and the importance to their region.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And if I recall, that project has only increased in terms of input we've heard from the communities in the last 2 years in terms of priority. So thank you. Anyone else on that project? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the Heartland Flyer extension. I remain very hopeful that we're going to see some good progress out of Congress in terms of funding all kinds of modal projects, including Amtrak. I know that the Heartland Flyer, from my perspective, it's not just about connecting Oklahoma City and Kansas, though important that is, but I take a big view of connecting Dallas to Chicago and really creating a Midwest corridor that I think provides lots of value to many states. So with that, Corey, let's start with you because Corey, I know you're right in the middle of many things related to passenger rail and the plan that's under development.
Yes, Secretary, happy to weigh in. This was listed as a high priority in our group. And just like we saw in the survey from this region, it was about modal choices, and this would add an additional modal choice to the region and add to the connections you just mentioned. And on top of that would be an economic driver for the region or some others that came out of our group.
Right. And Corey, before we leave you, maybe you could talk just a bit about the service development plan, maybe provide just a quick update. Where are we in that project, in that process?
Yeah, we're preparing to kick off with our consultant on the service development plan, and that will help us outline the costs needed to move this forward. It will help support any efforts that come from Amtrak at the federal level. And we'd look to have that wrapped up in the middle of 2022. And I will add that another piece of important note that came out of our group was if we can show a willingness and support to move this forward at the state level, our group felt that the federal investment would be there if we can show it as a state. So,
okay, thank you, Corey. Thank you. And then I'll open it up for any facilitator related to the 2 stars, or I'm also curious because I see some second priorities around some of the new projects that are in italics. So any additional conversation around the urban expansion projects? Okay, if not, Lisa, you want to go on to the next slide or the next list? All right. So I see 3 stars for project 530 Winfield Bypass. Corey, and I was able to go in and out of some rooms. Corey, I know you all had some conversation around this project.
Yeah, we had some robust conversation around this project, and getting into specifics, there was an opportunity to scale this project back or phase it. Was some input from the group. Focusing on the southern portion of the bypass first is something the group felt might be an opportunity. And the reason for the support of this project was a lot of industrial traffic and truck traffic currently commingling with local traffic. So that was a safety issue that came to mind.
Corey, I appreciate that. I'd also point out one, when we talk about moving from development, which is what we're talking about now, putting projects into development, but to move projects from development into construction, which is the next phase, really we want to work closely with communities to either identify potentially ways for that community to bring some funds to the table to assist with the construction or to consider downscoping a project so that we're able to get more improvements across the state faster. So I appreciate you pointing out the interest and willingness to consider a downscope. Thank you. Or phasing also sometimes is another way of looking at that. Other comments around either 530 or the other projects, please.
Yes, Secretary Matt Messina here. Our group did speak a little bit about 530, and one of the interesting comments that we got was that if this project doesn't move forward soon, it's going to continue to become more difficult to construct and plan for in the future as development continues to grow.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Yes, I can understand that. Other comments about any of the other projects? Other groups?
Secretary, this is Greg. We discussed 529, the importance there. The city of Arc City was in my group, and they just talked about how currently the trucks are pretty confused on how to get through there and are using a lot of the local road network. And they recently had a fatality due to that heavy truck traffic. And they think this is really important to get the truck traffic off of the local roads and will really help with the safety in the city.
Okay, thank you, Greg. And I'm sorry to hear about the fatality. My sympathies there. Thank you, Greg. Other comments?
Secretary, it's Mike. I have a comment on 533, the Kingman bypass.
Yes,
So the project is important to the city from a safety standpoint. 54 does run through town, runs past two schools. They often see a mixture of school traffic with the highway traffic and the truck traffic, which is inherently unsafe from a local standpoint. Project has also been on the books for a long time, and they feel it's time for it to be fully designed and built. Lastly, economic standpoint, they do have businesses and hotel opportunities on hold because everybody is unsure, right, of the future of the 54 corridor. They're waiting for it to be moved outside of town.
okay. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And I appreciate I appreciate people weighing in on the need to move forward with projects. Other comments related to rural expansion? Any conversation on the Ohio Street interchange as opposed to the River Valley project?
Yes, Secretary, that was discussed in our group, and there was a high priority on the Ohio Street project, mainly due to safety and congestion in the area.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Secretary, it's Mike Moriarty. Same conversation in my group as well. We have the school district in our session. There's a lot of concern. They have upwards of 1,000 students a day that use this location, that use the corridor. There was recently an unfortunate fatality at the intersection. So in short, safety was a key point of our conversation here today.
Thank you, Mike. Greg. Others? Okay, looks like more than one group spoke up about Ohio Street interchange. Thank you. I think this is one of the benefits of a rolling program is that we can see how traffic changes. We heard in the Southeast about a hospital closing and how that had impacted some traffic. We've certainly heard about some new businesses where truck traffic has changed. So this enables us to be better equipped to address emerging needs. On the other hand, you have to balance that with, you don't want to just chase every new development. So there is, we need to take a big view, but we also need some flexibility. All right, anything else? If not, we'll go on to modernization, please. All right, okay. Well, 3 stars takes us to 547. And it appears that this is actually a new project because it's in italics. Any group want to speak to 547? Matt Messina, I understand. I think it was, I was in your group. Matt, you had some comments about that.
Yeah, our group spoke to this, talking about it being a critical need to continue assisting with the development and expansion of industry in the area. And it was clearly stated that shoulders would do the trick and meet the needs that they're currently encountering.
Thank you. Other comments on 547? All right. If not, what about 722? Again, it appears to be a new project. Interchange improvements? Corey.
Yeah, Secretary, this is Corey. I can weigh in on that. A lot of traffic moving through this interchange. It sometimes can be difficult to maneuver with that added traffic. And I will say, like you just mentioned, the nature of the rolling program, there are other projects in the area that have recently been constructed, and there might be an opportunity to see how that impacts this project and how we can make adjustments moving forward.
Thank you, Corey. All right. Anyone else on modernization projects? All right. All right. Going once, going twice. I appreciate that everyone has stayed on. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right. So if you thought this was especially good TV, it's available on demand if you want to listen or watch again, or if you have colleagues, sincerely, who were not able to participate, they can review the materials, they can listen to this conversation, and they still have an opportunity to weigh in. Next slide. You'll get a short post-meeting survey. Help us do a better job, please, by weighing in. It just takes a couple of minutes. Next slide. And lastly, you can be looking for a pipeline announcement later this year in 2021. And sincerely, the entire process for local consult is framed around people, stakeholders talking, speaking. KDOT listens, and together, we work. So thank you all very much for being here today. I look forward to being in person next time. And we'll be back at the end of this year with an announcement about the development pipeline. Please buckle up and be safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.